Billijo, tell us, when did you first hear about the Peace Camp?
Actually, I'd actually known about the Peace Camp actually since it's probably 83, 84 when I was in Rochester, just because of my interest in anti-nuclear things.
So when did you first come out to the camp?
I actually did not come to the camp till sometime in '99, and I think it was towards June, or sometime this summer. I believe to be '99.
And where were you coming from at the time? Where were you living?
Oh, I was living in Rochester, and actually Maria is a big part of the reason I came out then, because I knew Maria, and actually she dragged me out to meet Estelle.
So, when you came out to the camp, what did you do?
Actually, the first time I was there, being a photographer, and part of my thing with images has always been graffiti or signage. I'm just fascinated by signage. And of course, showing the land and walked around, I was really obsessed with the images that were painted there, the graffiti. And even the very first time in the back of my head is, I got to return and photograph this. You can feel the spirit of the land, I think, is what I'm trying to say. I knew pretty much the history of it, but when you walk the land, having not been there during that period, you can feel what happened there. I get the areas goofed up, but the one furthest back towards the fence, is that Amazon Acres?
Amazon.
Yeah, you could hear people there almost. And again, that might be part of being a larger part Mohawk too. Native that I sense things like that, I always have. There's just a feeling about it. And of course the other school bus. How can you miss Estelle's school bus? Actually, Estelle and I tried to do some crazy things. I was going to do a big peace symbol with a tractor in the field. And we did. We did. Yeah, we cut most of the field back. And yeah, I drove the tractor in the ditch once. Got stuck and had to pull up my car. We were hauling trash to the back. And I was going a little too fast. And was it Maria and I, you and I, up the street there was a garage sale. And we got a garden tractor cart. Estelle's on the back, sitting on this pile.
No, that was the trailer that I had.
That Maria had brought.
That black pickup truck.
We were pulling that with the tractor then.
Yes, it was the black pickup truck trailer.
Right. Well, Estelle fell off.
I remember that.
I remember being bounced around. I don't remember really falling.
He was sitting on the back of the grass.
I thought it was the little tractor and the tongue flipped up in the air because it was a tilt bed thing. Yeah, we did some crazy things.
We did a lot of things.
Yeah, and it's funny. No experience is totally bad. And unfortunately, it's nice to come and remember the good parts as well as the bad.
Do you have mementos from the Peace Camp?
Mementos. I think the only I have the photographs from the Peace Camp, and I think. And I have to explain that I was kind of returning photographer too. I did photography in the 60s and very early 70s, and then went into woodworking, and I returned to photography about the same time I came to the land. And I will say, the land is a lens stealer. I lost a lens, a Nikon lens, in the back, somewhere along the fence by Amazon Acres, or maybe even the next farmer over. I kind of wandered around back there and got lost. And I came out of the woods. I was following turkeys. And I went to take a picture, and there's no lens on the Nikon. And we actually did a finding ritual, and it wasn't found.
I remember.
Yeah, tractor fodder. I know someone ran over that. But, yeah, actually, Estelle, it was you that actually took me around the land the first time. Maria was going to drive back, and we decided that wasn't a good idea. I think it was kind of wet then. And I don't know. I guess I went through kind of a bad thing at the same time in life, a sexual assault, and I kind of bailed out of Rochester, and I kind of volunteered to do what needed to be done. And I kind of enjoyed it there. We had some fun and some not so good times. I think one of the most empowering things for me is I'm deathly afraid of snakes. And I can remember mowing around the fire area, and I moved the log, and here's this poor little garden snake, and I grabbed it by the tail, and I went running. Smell, I got a snake. And actually, I feel sorry for the snake. Definitely afraid of humans now. But I'm not so afraid of snakes now.
Uh-huh.
And I think it's funny, you know, I know Estelle and I talked about this. We spent a lot of time talking. We wandering the land and probably a lot of theory and that. And the land can be a good place, it can be a bad place at times. It's kind of scary, really. I came to the land because I knew Maria. Maria's known me for a long time. Maria knew I was intersexed. And I think things went well for a while, but it created some problems with people on the land. And it's kind of sad to say, one of the persons I had a lot of problems with, or I think I did, I'm not sure. I know they didn't want to spend the night there because I was there. It was during, it was an anniversary type event because the women, it was at the same time as the Seneca Falls
Fire still burns.
Yeah, and for the most part I got along with great, other than I know one woman, and you can tell when people are uncomfortable with it, you know, and I'm kind of used to it, but actually the woman that surprised me the most is someone we've resolved, and that was Cindy, because she didn't want to spend the night there because I was there, and I ended up working with her doing peacekeeping, and now actually I volunteered to do peacekeeping with Cindy, and we've had some conversations about gender, and the person I asked, I can never say her name right, Marshall.
Marshall.
That was right.
Yeah, I know. They were trying to, prior to that weekend, they were trying to have the Radical Lesbian Fest was there. And they wanted to put a roof back on the outdoor kitchen. And I actually went on all the tent platforms stored in the lower barn. I started to take them apart and drug the plywood up, and Marshall would not work with me nailing it down. I don't know. I guess I understand intentional community, but I think for me, sometimes I just never know where I stand, and it's my life story, and I guess that's okay. I know there was a consensus, and I was kind of asked to leave, unless I came with an out-and-out member, and actually those conditions were kind of unacceptable. I don't know. I guess sometimes I just don't understand how oppressed people can become oppressive. And the funny thing is, yeah, I was really hurt. I worked through the emotional part in the kitchen because Alice asked me about it, and I started to cry when I was cooking. And it was just a tough time in my life, too, with dealing with a sexual assault, attempted rape by someone that I kind of respected, and then to get get it by the DA too. That was even worse, when all of a sudden it wasn't even going to go to grand jury when they had an out-and-out statement of what the man said he did, and he admitted doing it without force, of course. Oh, that's right, he sexually assaulted me to see if I had a vagina, but not with force. But he did pull my clothes off, so, you know, it was just a bad time. Yeah, and sometimes I think we go through those times, and I think part of but being radically different, whether it's just radically thinking or radically in some other way, and maybe even just radical is, I've kind of accepted a lot of times my fate in life to be a catalyst. And I think a lot of us that are in more, and I'm speaking kind of for everyone, but in more radical things in life are a catalyst, just to have other people think. And I guess maybe it was major progress to introduce the term gender into an intentional community. And that was, and that's kind of how I left, how I rationalized leaving, to not feel so hurt. I will admit, I had taken Twilight's motorcycle apart. She called me to come back to the land and fix it. And it was just, you gotta be joking. Put it in your truck and take it to your log cabin, and yeah. And actually there was one other time, the Radical Lesbian Fest, it was suggested I not be around. And I fixed the back well pump for that, which I got knocked on my ass, by the way, because the control box was sitting in a puddle and I picked it up without even thinking that it was hot. And Maria called me at Twilight's, because I went to Twilight's to work on her floors in her log cabin, and said lightning hit again and it doesn't work. And you know what I felt like? Well, I probably even said it. You know, we get angry. Call the pump guy in Seneca Falls. You know, make an exception to have a man on the land and not coming to fix it. And actually, Maria knew what I did to replace the startup capacitor. Just went and got one. But yeah, I was kind of bitter towards the land for a while. Yeah, actually, what I think's ironic is with the whole thing, politically, theoretically, we all said the same thing. I just happened to be intersexed. And I guess to qualify the intersex part, I didn't know I was intersex till 41. I've had surgery scars that I didn't know what they were for. I was raised as a boy. And that's the male privilege thing. And I have to state for the record, because I thought about this a lot, because people, you know, when you're given something that's a privilege and you're not that, is that a privilege or is that really an abuse when you don't understand it? I mean, to work, I worked in the automotive field, the woodworking field, and I can be in a shop, and I was a foreman for a Mercedes dealer, and the guys would go to lunch, and of course you'd go with them. And I never understood what the hell they were talking about, or I couldn't relate to it in that sense, so I'm not really sure what that privilege meant. Yeah, socialization, it had to have some shaping. But again, and this is something that developed for me, I'm not 100% sure. I honor intentional community. I have not gone to Michigan. I've been asked, and I even know they changed the policy, and I haven't gone. And even as a lesbian avenger, which really is the one that wanted to change the policy, I just avoided going. And I just don't want to bridge that issue. I guess I've been in one spot that didn't feel so good, so why go to it again? Well, usually I do, because I have that insanity, you know. But it just, some of the things really made no sense to me. And I know I said things that upset people too, because a lot of what I've studied is Marxism. I'm very politically Marxist in that sense. And if we didn't have our human nature, and screw gender, I have to be better than someone else, and I'm not proud to say that. That's just the way as humans well, I don't even like the word human. It's still got man in it. That's the radical me. But even as humans, that's pretty pathetic. You know, it's really hard to change. And I did say that, and I think it upset some people. I said all things you can attribute to patriarchy and socialization. Some you can. I mean, it's a multi-causal thing. And I'm not saying 100% socialization and 100% human nature. It's some combination. But also, yeah, so when I'm trained as an anthropologist, I could see some things that happened just in the circle of women there that was the same things that happen in dominant society. And what I have to question, some of it probably is patriarchy, but I think a big part's human nature, and I did bring that up. I said, well, no, you know, and I'm not defending men per se, because I've found men are pretty clueless too. They're more clueless than women are. They don't even realize consciously at times what their privilege is. You know, I just see them as clueless. Yeah, they do have privilege and they don't even know it. Maybe that's where real socialization is, more with men than with women. But that rocked the boat with some. And I know Twilight got really ticked at me. And a lot of things that happened that people said were a male thing weren't. I grew up with a father. My dyke sister is just as mechanical as I am. It's just the way we grew up. And I saw Twilight doing something very unsafe with a chainsaw, and that was cutting little twigs. And I just stopped her, and she, I don't know, I guess that was perceived as a male thing. And it wasn't a gender-based thing at all. If I see someone doing something that's unsafe, and I just, as a person, think, whoa, you're going to get hurt. That thing's going to come back right in your forehead. And that's just because I used a chainsaw a lot. I think some things were just misperceived. And I just probably came at a time when things weren't willing, when also you had a transsexual from Ithaca, Robin, who I've had other dealings with since then. And actually, I got a first assignment for a deal with Robin. Remember, you gave me her letter. And she was kind of demanding a representation by the land and to be there. And I don't know, I don't think I really demanded things. I volunteered, and maybe I know someone, when I brought my computer and printer down to do the archives, because that was that weekend. Stella and I went crazy doing all the photographs and nice little things, and right away someone said, "See, you're moving in, you know, you're bringing all your crap here." Sometimes that was too stupid to say, well, I'll just put it back in the car then. You know, that's okay, we don't need to use it, but some of it's my life story too. You know, you really, when you don't belong to much and you really try, and maybe sometimes you do over try, and it's not a gender thing.
So Billijo, tell me, when you first came to the land and met women, what was your understanding of who the land was for and what the community was about?
Well, I did understand it was an intentional women's space at that point. But I think what the disagreement is, when do we identify as women? And to me, that's where I was identified by. And I don't know, maybe it was by default. Maybe I knew I wasn't a man, so therefore I am a woman. I don't know. That's still an iffy thing. And one of the things I've worked on today, I've worked a lot with intersex community, and not necessarily Cheryl Chase anymore, because their intersex society is actually recommending we don't intervene, but you have to make a choice later, one way. They're almost doing a one way or the other. And part of my belief is I don't see anything wrong with not intervening at all. I don't know, maybe I'm just looking at the whole thing of deconstructing gender. Which I don't think has anything to do with being a woman, in a woman's space. Because I think the goals and even radical feminism now is to deconstruct gender. So many times we talk the same things, there just seem to be biased.
So when you arrived at the camp, you self-identified as a woman?
Oh, definitely. Oh, yeah, it's been true for many years. And I will admit, chromosomally, I have a very odd makeup. And I was born with a micro penis, but if you've ever watched, I think it's Discovery's film on What Sex Am I, they show a thing with maybe all these little frames of babies, and they all have penises, and which one is the girl? And they all are. You know, where do you define things? And I just needed, you know.
So did you find women at Peaceland that accepted that were fine
I think most did till push came to shove. And I think what really happened, being a Prime weekend, the fact that 2 people complained, then it became an issue because it was one of the last, and I think probably the last remaining East Coast intentional communities. I might have that wrong. I think it was at that time. I think most now are west, and I don't even know how many are left there. But it became an issue because then they had to defend that. Or that's the way I perceived it. And I think actually that's the way it was kind of explained to me by Twilight at one time.
And how much time are you talking about between the point at which you first came to Peaceland till this happened and you were asked to?
I really think I spent probably 2 months there, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong about that, but it was a fair length of time.
When you were living there?
No, I was going back and forth. I'd come down on the weekend, and that was about it. But sometimes I did get there before people got there, and I think that was the problem, as if I was going, I wasn't going to rob them, but what can I say?
And so once you left, were you still in contact with some of the women?
I can't really say I've run into Estelle because of course she moved away, but Twilight and I have bumped at the Image Gay Film Festival in Rochester a couple times, and Maria, now and forever, we did art shows together, and we did them as a man, and when I was living as a man, and Maria will tell you that all I did was look at my feet, you know, I got bubbly and obnoxious and mouthy with the knowledge of what had been done at birth, because I wasn't told. I was given testosterone as allergy shots, which I'm still not very happy about. And one of the things is sometimes maybe I shouldn't talk as much about intersex and gender-based things, but I don't want anyone to go through what I went through. I don't know, Michelle and I had some problems. There was one night that kind of shocked me that weekend where I was in the house with Maria and she come in and I think I was in the pit and she pulled me aside and said I was nothing but a fucking witch ruining the land, driving the land apart. And what kind of surprised me is she was also drunk, and I didn't realize, I thought the land was kind of an alcohol-free space, which is neither here nor there. I mean, I'm recovering, and I was at that point, but I just kind of understood it was kind of a drug, alcohol-free space anyway. That was kind of upsetting. But maybe I am a witch, you know, and maybe I should be proud to be a witch. What can I say? It's probably not the first time or the last time. It was just a circumstance of it, because it wasn't my intention to drive anything apart there. And I can't... I think some part of me would leave with anger, but some part of me also respected what was said. I thought about, my God, being the activist I am, and I think I even emailed Alice, this could be a good one to protest the Women's Peace Land. This would be radical. But I let that go.
Were there any women in that collective that were fighting to have you stay?
Mary Hilton and I had been friends for a long time. I helped her move out of Rochester, actually. I met Mary through Maria. And I don't know how involved Mary was with the land. I know it pissed her off enough, she just wanted to walk away. And I don't know if she did or didn't, I didn't ask that. I did have kind of a surprise because someone that was really nice to me that whole time was Grace. And I came back to the land to pick Maria up, and this is when it was almost going to the end. And I was kind of pissed anyway because I picked Maria up because Andy had like a wedding thing there, and Andy was female to male identified, and I thought that was just as inconsistent in my mind as I don't know, why would a woman's intentional space embrace someone that wants to gain male privilege in that sense? It just didn't make sense to me. And I think part of it too is, and I think maybe a little bit of what happened when I came there, people were wanting to keep it going and to do what you can, and you know, I willingly agreed to be part of that. Well, I think the major challenge for me was not to strike out back. I didn't. So what a people. Part of me, you know, you get hurt, you want to do that. And I really struggled with not wanting to do that. I did it in my subtle way, yeah. Fix it down, pump yourself, or hey, Twilight, I'm not coming there to fix you watch me take it apart. I showed you what I was doing very slowly.
Yeah.
You do it or find someone else.
Right.
And it's kind of like coming back there to pick Maria up because she didn't have a ride. And actually, I think I was in Ithaca. I was on my way home from something else. And to talk with Grace and to be totally blown off and to offer her the same photographs, you know, I was willing to part with the whole time, and she wouldn't even look at them.
Was that
I don't know. I really do not know. I even said to Maria, what happened here? Because Grace and I, of all people, had a pretty good rapport.
Mm-hmm.
Cindy and I actually had over the years, but I can understand where Cindy came from. Because I actually did other things with Cindy. I had a photographer stay with me from Santa Barbara that was photographing women across America prior to my even going to the land. And Cindy was one of the people I set up, and I hadn't realized that her girlfriend partner wasn't that out, so they couldn't even really do the photographic thing in the sense this woman wanted to do it. But you know, that wasn't quite so bad. I think being called a witch was bad, and I understand the consensus. I have to defend them.
I just want you to know that witches are my favorite people.
Actually, they're mine too. Right now I do with a woman out of Chicago. I'm supposed to be doing a crown circle, and we had to cancel it because Carla just went through breast cancer surgery.
So after you left the Peace Land, and had you already created those incredible photographs, or did you work on those after the fact?
The images were done, and I started the printing after I got back. And I gotta tell you, this is really funny. really, really ironic because I did quite a few women's music fests, and particularly Ithaca, and people are seeing these photographs. And here I'm giving them the story on the land. And I left out that I got kicked out. I never told anyone. At the Ithaca Women's Music Fest?
No. Were you kicked off the land?
What do you mean, was I kicked off the land? No, I couldn't abide with the conditions of being there.
Okay.
It was kind of, I don't know. I just thought that was just as marginalizing, if not even more so.
The collective was asking that you have a
Yeah,
member
yeah.
of the collective be there with you on the land.
Yeah.
You had to be chaperoned.
Yeah, and what would anyone do in the same thing? You'd probably say what I did. Well, screw you, you know.
I'd say fuck off.
Well, I'm being polite. I was raised to be polite. No, not really.
So you were in Ithaca showing these prints and...
Yeah, people are saying, and I said, yeah, that's from, you know, and of course went into a little bit of an explanation because I knew it. And I actually knew quite a few people that I've dealt with over the years that were originally there. The only one that comes to mind immediately is Barbara Casper. But she's a professor at Brockport now in social work, and I lecture on gender and sexuality for her classes. And I actually don't think I ever told Barbara about what happened with me and the land, because I come to some point that it was important to me, but maybe in the scheme of things, maybe it's not. I don't know. It just, how do you explain yourself? I mean, I can't say I marginalized myself, but sometimes you just let things go. And it did introduce language into something that had never had it before. It's kind of funny, you know, I had all these weird thoughts, you know, as this whole thing was progressing. I can't remember who had probably more facial hair than I had, and I was really wondering, who the hell has testosterone here? You know, I have zip, unless it's installed, or I know I could actually take testosterone now, because that's part of my chronic fatigue. I have none. I don't even have what you have, Estelle. You know, and that, you know, and postmenopausal is pretty marginal. I probably have more estrogen, because I still take estrogen because actually for bone thinning.
Billijo, do you think that society has grown in its understanding since, let's say, since 2000? I mean, this was going on, let's say, around...
That was 99, yeah. I think in some ways, but I've always put myself in an educator role, probably even more so since then.
Yeah, and I don't mean to, you know,
No,
make any excuse. I just wonder about us as a people that, you know, that we do have such gender bias, that we do have so many apprehensions and fears around what's not familiar to us. And I know what happened within our group and how some people could not make adjustments, and that, you know, so it was like having to make having to keep the whole group was really hard. Maria, it was terribly hard.
Yeah.
And I just remember being so glad that Alice was there. That because the support system was not, we were not set up to give support.
I never really asked for it in that sense or expected it.
No, that's true.
I do think thinking back, that I should have been given the opportunity before you did a consensus discussion was to present who I am, because Elliot and Otter, I didn't know them from Stones. I only met them that weekend. That's where I was referring to the facial hair, I think. What can I say? You gotta make digs now, man. For me, it's a little bit of humor. It's to keep myself sane sometimes. But I think that part was wrong. I can understand the consensus process of being within this. But I never really was. The only people that knew me are the people that work with me. And actually, I didn't meet Alice till that weekend, and we did a little photography thing. And, you know, New York City people are a lot more open-minded. And I was picking on Alice that not only is she a fag hag, she's a trans hag too.
Right.
Yeah.
But that,
which I think's okay.
That was really important, Alice.
Oh, yeah.
That was, to me, that was, for me anyhow, it was important. That I knew that you had familiarity with transgendered people, and that you would be, I certainly was hoping that you were going to be support, but it doesn't take away the pain of the whole thing, or the injustice of it, or the fact that, you know, well, you know, as much as we talk justice, that frequently we're not just.
I think also, can I just say that it was an experience of us getting in touch with our conservatism. We were pushed to, as a collective, to a wall that we hadn't looked at. And all the unearthing of everything, you brought something into the community that was new.
Oh, definitely.
That opened up a whole new dialogue, that we were in touch with our backwardness, right at that moment. Which it was a gift that you gave to the group, even though at the time it was a terrible gift for you.
Right. When you talk about being a catalyst, you catapulted us into a place that we had actually avoided, not wanted to deal with.
Well, part of who I am is the reason I'm here too. I thought about that when I first got there. I really want to go open a bunch of old stuff that maybe I didn't totally deal with. Maybe I have. Maybe we never totally deal with anything, and pain's always there, just lesser. I mean, it's sadness is there, not the initial outrage and anger type pain. And it is sad.
It's very sad.
And it's sad when I don't think people. I really struggle with this. And when I was in doing a lot of women's studies things, you know, I really struggled with trying to find different words. And there aren't any. That's the patriarchal part. But
I remember the woman issue coming up. And I do remember stating that you are a woman, born woman. You were born both. What's the problem? And then that male privilege issue came up, and I just don't understand it.
Well, if I truly have had male privilege, which some people may think I have, I don't think I have. Maybe I have, you know. Socialization's a strange thing, but at least I've used it for women's advantage in the last 20 years or so. Think of it that way. No, get out of that one still.
Wait, restate that?
What I said is let's assume I did have this male privilege. I disagree because I think in a lot of ways it was an abuse, because that's just not where I was at. But I've used it for women's advantage, whatever male privilege I've had.
Yeah.
One of the things I'm in hot demand is have people to teach them how to piss men off. You know, I found that really well, and that's just a lot of the protests I've done. You know how many times you get that, I call it the dick to plug the dyke mentality. I get so tired of that. I even made a syndrome for it. But I do lecture a lot on campuses, and I am outspoken about gender in general. And I'm always questioning myself. If I was intersexed, do I really have to be one or the other? And it's just a comfort level thing. Actually, if I were to be in a place where I could really say I am just freaking queer, in the queer theory sense, not in the more popular, I have no problem doing that, but no one understands that. It's nothing worse to do a lecture to senior or senior undergrad or even grad school social work students about gender and sexuality, trans, intersex, orientation, you know, the whole gambit, and say, hey, no, all these things don't have to be congruent now, if that's what we're told. And to have some other professor who happened to be, sometimes they do double classes, and there's a woman at Brockport that is radical feminist queer, and she always brings that up. When I got an hour and a half, I'd rather stay on what I am than trying to give queer theory in an hour and a half. So some just out of high school, you know, immediately into college, some returning students would understand. But in theory, yeah, I like queer theory. And I can't even define it in a half hour.
I was just going to ask.
Well, you got to start with define the feminist movement and what they believed and what they believed was changeable. Then go to the gay lesbian movement, because that's the next step, and define that. And then just say queer and say everything's changeable. No, that's a simplified version. That's the one I like. Change whatever you want. You know, on the consensus thing, I'd like to jump back to that because I'm recovering and I've spent a lot of time in AA. I've kind of, and I had immense problems there too, by the way, with gender stuff. They talk about, they're worse than intentional community. Well, they are an intentional community, and it's a very insecure people. And did I move? I just sat up.
You're good.
Okay. They have consensus, but they do it different. And I like a consensus in a way because it's not absolute consensus. The important thing is, and I worked at an area service level, and you do a vote on an issue. Everyone presents their opinions, and you do a vote. And then you call for dissenting or minority opinion, and you restate that, and then you rehash it and call it, did it change anyone's vote? Which is, I guess, maybe a modified consensus-based democracy. But consensus-based is tough stuff. How do you decide anything?
Fantastically, there's huge responsibility with consensus. And that's for dissenters to come up with resolution, you know, to bring the two far edges closer to a center.
Yeah, that's what AA does.
Unfortunately, you know, there are times when we're just such immature, you know, so unable sometimes to even know what it is that we feel or fear. Some people don't spend a whole lot of time really challenging themselves or looking at why it is we fear certain things or why something is
I have kind of a theory about some of that with intentional community too, particularly women's community. And of course, this is from my background in counseling. My background as an anthropologist. And just being totally out of the box. And sometimes I can step far enough back and get a little different picture. And I found with some, and I'm not even necessarily meaning the people I experienced, the women I experienced at the land, but some other situations under the guise of feminism or radical feminism. Sometimes I think, and this is a woman's thing, a little stereotypical, women get stuck on anger and don't know how to transgress it. And when you have someone that challenges that anger, or transgressing the anger, boy, then you dig in deeper. And boy, that is so true of feminism. And I think that could be part of what happened. It's just a shame. I just felt with many people there wasn't a dialogue and then a decision. And I'm saying that again because that's what I really felt. Or I'd have little bits of dialogue here with Twilight. And you and I always had great, because I think politically we thought the same. Theoretically, and even on that level. And I learned a lot too.
Yeah.
You know?
I remember one of the things that you were on me really strong about, that I needed to change people's minds and attitudes, that you were being marginalized. And I remember having to respond with, I hear what you're saying, I see the marginalization, but I cannot force people to change their minds and attitudes. Do you remember that conversation?
Oh yeah.
And feeling really like pressured, you know.
Well, a lot of that may be my process of anger.
Well,
too. I mean, anger's not a good thing for me either. I do it usually with humor, or I get the lesbian Avenger directed in your face, and
I don't know any place else that you might have been. I mean, you had to be where you were, and I had to be, you know, where I was. It was. I'm just sorry that it was not resolved. That there's still, that I actually have sadness about it. I have sadness about the whole thing, but actually my biggest sadness is the land's gone. Yeah. It wasn't even, and again, it's the way we began. It wasn't even the people that were there through this whole thing. It's what existed there before that can be felt. I've been in contact with Maria, and actually I was still holding on to a little bit of resentment that I'm a good alcoholic, you know, and you know, we know resentment, and I made suggestions if X and X and X were done, I would help bail it out from there. I do what I can with grants. I've expanded so much in my life since then. I know people in about every circle. Partly because of now the Lesbian Rights Summit. You know, I'm beginning to know people on even trans feminism people on the West Coast. Actually, I met my very first other intersexed feminist, I guess, at the Lesbian Rights Summit. And that was a real thrill because it's a big percent of the population, but it's a massive continuum. And there's true hermaphroditism, but it's mostly pseudo. It's a condition of genitals, hormones, chromosomes. And I think one thing that as people we don't acknowledge, and I think that's why there's transsexual, transgendered people, I think the brain plays a bigger part than we could even imagine in telling us
who we are, even when we don't know. So there's something, I guess, innate there about who we are. And I guess that's something that's gonna happen in the years to come. I usually don't have a lot to do with the trans thing. I worked with a couple trans organizations and kind of was the token intersexed, which happens. And I don't know, I think I'm just more of an individual now. Doing a lot of work in the gay, lesbian, I love it now too. What is it? Gay, lesbian, bi, trans, intersexed, queer allies. Did I get it all in? I mean, I'm doing press releases. I've got that programmed into my spell check. All I gotta do is put the first couple letters in. Queer works better, folks. I can spell that without having to spell check it.
Was it a process for you to come here today?
I guess they say insanity's doing the same thing over and over again. I'm really good at that. And when Estelle particularly asked me, that had a special meaning. And then when I found out Alice was coming, it's funny, you can be horribly discouraged, but you don't have to give up hope. And that's what it really is. And I really, really tried to capture that spirit in photographs. And there's a lot more I probably haven't even scanned or printed. I don't know, I shot a lot of film there. It was worth coming, you know. And I've had, since I'm trying to think how long it's been since I did the Ithaca. I've had those photos boxed up for a while.
So do you think being able to talk about it today in a more supportive environment will help you find closure with what happened? Or?
I think closure is a misstated word, because I don't think we ever have closure. We have some level of acceptance of, and maybe it's where we've been, you know, and where we're at right now. And part of my hope is coming was also as much to see people to do this, is to keep the Herstory part going. Because it shouldn't be lost. Too many things get lost. You know, maybe sometimes things are only supposed to exist for the space they existed in, but I don't know. It's a story that still needs to be told. Particularly with being in another war, particularly with being in a situation where who knows what our government's doing, but other governments are definitely doing nuclear things. It's a scary world. Even more so, I think, than it was back then.